Good evening. How are you? Good, good. I'm happy to see you all here. Um, Ujima, a people of color arts collective on campus, is going to welcome us with song. Thank you very much for that. We really appreciated it. My name is Diane Hereford. I didn't tell you that, did I? And I'm the director of the Africana Studies program. I'm thrilled that you're here tonight. We've been planning for Dr. Eddie Glaude to come for months, and he's here tonight. And I'm glad that you've joined us for what will be one of the most important moments at Vassar College this year. Before we hear from Dr. Glaude, I would be remiss if I did not thank Primavera Ward for all of her work that she's done to make this possible, and Angela DiPolo for all the work she's done to make this possible. And the departments of the sociology, American Studies, the program in American Studies, the religion department, the dean's office, the president's office. This has actually really been one of those moments where we've had a community effort to bring Dr. Glaude here, and we're proud of ourselves for doing what we could to bring him here. Those who know me know that I could talk on and on and on and on, but I will spare you that, and I will let my colleague, my dear colleague, Jonathan Cahn, introduce our speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. I tell you, it's so good to be together. It's not old yet, right? Getting back together again in spaces like this. It's really nice to join together in community tonight. So I'm Jonathan Cahn. I'm a professor of religion, Africana Studies, and American Studies, and it's a real joy to be here to introduce my colleague and friend, Eddie Glaude. But before I welcome Eddie back to Vassar, allow me a moment just to say a couple quick thank yous too. First, I want to thank my colleagues in Africana Studies, especially Diane Hereford and Sam Opondo, whose thoughtfulness and passion have made for such exquisite partnership in bringing Eddie to campus. And in truth, really, Professor Glaude is here because last year Diane started talking to us all about her deep concerns about the state of American democracy, and also about the crucial role that African Americans have always played in this country's political tradition. And then she started watching this young man, Eddie Glaude, on MSNBC, who, in Diane's words, and this is almost a direct quote, has some really important things to say to us. So Diane got this ball rolling. Dan, I want to thank you for that. I also want to thank Prima, I don't know where Prima just went, Primavera Ward and Angela DiPolo. Angela's the Director of Administrative Affairs in the President's Office, and Prima is the Africana Studies Administrative Assistant. It's one thing to say that we wouldn't be sitting here without them, which is true, but it's truer to say that we wouldn't be sitting here with such a sense of joy and occasion without them. Angela and Prima bring grace and imagination and strength to us here at the college, and I want to thank them for teaching us those virtues in everything they do. Professor Glaude, Eddie, welcome back to Vassar. I say welcome back because it was 14 years ago that you were last on campus giving a lecture. At least I believe that's right. 14 years ago, when I was a very, very junior faculty member who was encouraged for the first time on my being here to invite someone to campus to give a lecture. Now, that the one person I wanted to bring to campus then was Eddie Glaude said a lot about the role he played in my career at the time. Eddie was, for all intents and purposes, my dissertation advisor. He took the time to read my work, but more to encourage me and inspire me and provoke me to take the passion I had for Du Bois's The Souls of Black Folk and to say something more. Now, 14 years later, an enormous American and even international audience has learned about Professor Glaude's gifts of intellectual passion and generosity. Through books like Democracy in Black and Begin Again, although Eddie, I have to admit, I come back to the early works, Exodus and A Shade of Blue, the way we all come back to our favorite albums, to the degree that students even know what an album is today. But through Democracy in Black and Begin Again, Professor Glaude has been working hard at laying plain for a wide audience about what he calls the ruins, or in Glaude's other quoting of Samuel Beckett, the mess of the American project. But what's also the case, and this is ever more poignantly true in the way he thinks with Baldwin and Begin Again, Glaude has been equally intent on helping us imagine a way through this mess, the terror and the fear, those are his words, towards something yet unseen. He asks, quote, "Are we going to risk everything, finally, to become a truly multiracial democracy and the first of its kind in the West?" So Glaude wants us to take that risk. And at the end of Begin Again, he invites us to sink more deeply, more critically, into Baldwin's understanding of the way love is crucial to that risk. This is a hard task, but if I can return to the personal for a moment, often at the beginning of every semester, when I greet my new students, I say to them that one of my goals for the course is for them to develop and deepen their loves. Now, when I say that, I'm actually thinking of Eddie Glaude. No one, and I mean no one, has taught me more professionally about what this sort of love looks like. Eddie's entire writing can be understood as tracing a difficult tradition of love from David Walker to John Coltrane. Eddie, thank you for coming to Vassar and helping us imagine ways to join you in that tradition.
Thank you, Jonathan, for that amazing introduction. Almost 25 years ago, a phone call started all of this. And my life has been enriched by you and your family. Your work has influenced me in so many ways, even when I disagree and realize that I really wasn't disagreeing. So thank you. Sister Diane, thank you for your smile, your courageous leadership, your insistence. Thank you, Africana Studies, and all the other departments, religion, American Studies, all the other departments that made it possible. Sister Prima, appreciate you. Sister Angela, appreciate you. And all the invisible labor, the folks that aren't seen who are making this event possible, I appreciate you. Let me just jump into this. Is that all right? Can you hear me? I'm going to try something tonight that I haven't done before. I'm going to read a little bit from the new book. I haven't read any of this in public before, at least some portions of the talk. So it's a delight to be here with you this evening, to be back on Vassar's campus, even as the sky opens up, to see old friends and to see you. Now, my task tonight takes us away from the beauty of Vassar during this time of year. Instead, I want to, and honestly, I think I have to, confront the ugliness of now, to talk about the challenges we face and the storms that lie ahead. Indeed, the storms that currently swirl above our heads. So much has happened and so quickly. Time feels differently now, at least to me, compressed, fragmented, lost, all of which has affected my own sense of perception and balance. Matters seem a bit off. I'm not quite right. Over 1 million Americans are dead. And one can lose one's footing in the face of such death at such a scale. That much is true. And nothing can change that fact. COVID-19 still rages. And we live in a country, we live in this country as if that fact no longer matters. Quote, in this place, and more particularly in this time, generations appear to flower, flourish, and wither with the speed of light, James Baldwin wrote in 1976. He went on to say, quote, I suspect that there really has been some radical alteration in the structure, the nature of time. One may say there are no clear images. Everything seems superimposed on and at war with something else. This road, the road that seemed to pull one forward into the future, is also pulling one backward into the past, end quote. That was 1972. And here we are in 2022. And it feels like deja vu. Wash, rinse, and repeat. What else? What else? What else? Buffalo happened. Uvalde happened. Highland Park and all of the shootings in between. Political strife still has the nation by the throat as illiberal forces threaten the very foundation of the republic. Y'all saw that rally on Saturday? The Trump rally on Saturday? Kind of liturgy. Fear of the great replacement has sent some of us spiraling. Terror and panic have overrun large swaths of the nation. Politicians and pundits exploit that fear and sense of grievance for their own aims and ends, and black and brown people have to bear the burden of this madness of what Abraham Lincoln referred to as fever dreams. And here we are, confronted with a radical choice about what will we do in the face of it all. I've been obsessing these last few years over the work of James Baldwin. To my mind, Baldwin is perhaps one of the most insightful American writers about the American project. He grabs Ralph Waldo Emerson by the nape of the neck and takes him across the proverbial tracks. And there we get a different sense of the American project, so not so much of the shining city on the hill, but a nation rife with contradiction, of a nation that refuses to grow up, and of those who believe that the color of their skin affords them a certain value and standing. That belief and practice constitute what the theologian Howard Thurman called a mood that no law or laws can dispel. In The Luminous Darkness, Thurman wrote that, quote, it must be remembered that segregation is a mood, a state of man, and its external manifestation is external, the root of the evil, and evil it is, Thurman wrote, is in the human spirit. Laws which make segregation illegal may or may not attack the root of the evil. The law cannot deal with the human spirit directly, Thurman writes. If there is no fundamental transformation of the person, of the society, and laws can only set the stage for that transformation to happen, not guarantee it, but if there is no fundamental transformation of the person or the society, then those who bear the brunt of that society's contradictions will find themselves over and over again navigating and negotiating fever dreams, confronting and dealing with this American madness which has at its heart that some people, because they are white, ought to be valued more than others, combined with unbridled greed and selfishness. Wash, rinse, and repeat. This is not to deny the fact of substantive change, but what are we to do as the fever spikes in this country today? And here I want to turn to Baldwin more explicitly. Y'all all right? Just checking on you. In his last book, published in 1985, and there's a new edition coming out, 2 years before his death, Baldwin wrote about the Atlanta child murders. The book is titled The Evidence of Things Not Seen. Most critics aren't particularly fond of the book, and I must admit that Baldwin isn't at the height of his powers here. But he's struggling with a terribly difficult problem, and it required a kind of patience and attentiveness that was naughty for a man who lived such a hard life. Baldwin liked his Johnny Walker Black. But what was the question? How do we address black suffering when black people hold the reins of power? You have a black mayor and black chief of police in a city too busy to hate, and these babies from the poor side of town were being murdered. We don't need to get into the particulars of his account. It is the last paragraph of the book that I want to bring to your attention. Baldwin writes, quote, "The author of a crime is what he is. He knows it, can make no more demands, nor is anything more demanded of him. But he who collaborates is doomed, bound forever in that unimaginable and yet very common condition which we weakly suggest as hell. In that condition, in every waking American should know it, one can never again summon breath to cry, 'Let my people go,'" end quote. America is what it is, he suggests. We know the country has organized itself in such a way that values certain people over others. We know that we have tinkered around the edges for generations, but that fundamental valuation still obtains, affecting the distribution of advantage and disadvantage in this country. And when the fever dream spikes, when the madness takes hold again, that belief threatens to swallow the entire experiment whole. To collaborate with this, to collaborate with that is in effect to turn your back on a tradition that made me possible. To collaborate with that, you can no longer claim that tradition as your own. Remember, you can never again summon breath to cry, "Let my people go." Why? Because you have joined the house of Pharaoh. What would it mean for you and me to collaborate with the world as it is? You didn't hear the question. What does it mean for you and me to collaborate with the world as it is? Where your aspiration for success versus students and presence in high places versus students offer cover for the status quo. Where would we, when we tinker around the edges as the fever dreams take hold, what does it mean to collaborate with the world as it is? And you must remember that the fever dream is that bundle of lies and fantasy coiled together like snakes that justify the slaughter. Abraham Lincoln invoked fever dream on the floor of the House of Representatives in 1848 in response to President Polk's invasion of Mexico. He said President Polk was lying, that a lie was being used to justify the slaughter. I believe the aim of the grand tradition out of which I come, the grand tradition of the black freedom struggle, wasn't simply to make room for black folk like me at the table, but to fundamentally reorganize who and what is valued in this country. Diversifying evil doesn't change the meaning of the noun. Diversifying evil doesn't change the meaning of the noun. In this moment when Baldwin was writing, with poor people burying their babies and black political elites ignoring them, he struggled with the meaning of freedom. He understood, like Thurman, that the hard work, the really hard work after the collapse of Jim Crow had commenced. He put it this way, quote, "When the walls are down, it is then that the real work of building a healthy American society begins. The raising of the wall is prelude. Important, critical, urgent, vital, but prelude nevertheless. About this," Thurman writes, "there must not be any mistake. What would it mean to collaborate with the world as it is? I want to suggest to you right now that the most dangerous combination in this country at this moment is not only the combination of hatred and greed and selfishness, the combination of the loud racist with the white liberal who's afraid to go too far. At every moment, at every turn in our country's history, when we have been on the precipice of fundamental change, that wasn't the folk who were running around shouting racial epithets. It wasn't the folk who were engaged in the violence. It was the folk who were worried that we were going too far. We have to make a choice. We have to make a choice about what kind of society we want to live in, about what values ought to animate our being together. And that choice isn't rooted in some easy, facile notion of representation, of some mystical idea of obligation to the race. No, that's too easy. It must be rooted in a moral vision of what is right for every human being, especially the ones you care most about. Selfishness and greed have overrun any robust notion of the public good in this country, and any serious idea of obligation we might have for our fellows. And if we're honest, we've all become complicit in it all. What choice will you make as we witness the assault on voting rights? What choice will you make as we witness the assault on women's rights? The defense of a criminal justice system and of policing that deepens the precarity of our babies, the continuation of educational policies that fail our children at every turn. When you see that so many of us may not survive this madness, what choice will you make, Vassar students? I'm not trying to tell you what kind of politics you should have. I'm insisting that you get clear on who you are and what you are committed to doing about this world of ours. Vassar's nice. It's a wonderful little utopian space, but the headwinds of the storms are howling. What choice will you make? I come out of a grand tradition. Hard-working folk on the coast of Mississippi who loved hard and left some bruises. But they insisted that I see myself in the full light of others, and in times of darkness and despair, they told me to look within and find that purpose rooted in love, which would serve as a guiding light. Freedom is more than simply being left alone or being able to do whatever you want to do. Freedom is more than putting your foot under white folks' table. Freedom is found in the purposefully driven life, to reclaim that phrase, in trying to make good on the promise that made you possible. What are you going to do in the face of the storms? Jimmy was brokenhearted in his last days. He saw what the country had become. In his last interview with Quincy Troop in November of 1987, he would be dead the following month. He said, quote, "I was right. I was right. I was right about what was happening in the country, what was about to happen to all of us, really, one way or the other, and the choices people would have to make, and watching people make them and denying them at the same time. I don't care who says what, I watched it happen. All of this because they want to be white, because it's the only way to justify the slaughter." End quote. Madness abounds. El Paso, Buffalo, Uvalde, Trump rallies. In October of 2018, we might have, seems like a lifetime ago, less than a year before El Paso, During Sabbath services, Gregory Bowers entered the Tree of Life Synagogue in the Squirrel Hill neighborhood of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He yelled, quote, "All Jews must die," and killed 11 people and wounded 6 others. Bodies have been left everywhere these last few years. Ours may be thought of as an age of death. Bowers had already declared online that, quote, "the Hebrew society, immigrant society, likes to bring invaders in that kill our people. I can't sit by and watch my people get slaughtered," he said. "Screw your optics, I'm going in." End quote. As the New York Times reported on the day of the El Paso murder about Patrick Crusius, quote, "From New Zealand to Pittsburgh to a synagogue in Poway, California, aggrieved white men over the last several months have turned to mass murder in service of hatred against immigrants, Jews, and others they perceived as threats to the white race," end quote. Aggrieved white men? Not quite. This is a kind of madness that cuts deeper than that. I don't mean to suggest some clinical or medical notion of madness. I will leave that to those who want to keep their guns and say that the real problem rests with the mental health of these killers. For me, these quote-unquote aggrieved men for whom the fever dream has spiked suffer from an American madness that has threatened this republic from its birth. We are not who we say we are in this country. And mirrors keep revealing the truth that makes paranoia a decided feature of our political lives. We suffer from a kind of national schizophrenia. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. put it this way in his last book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community? Quote, "Ever since the birth of our nation, white America has had a schizophrenic personality on the question of race. She's been torn between selves, a self in which she proudly professed the great principles of democracy and a self in which she practiced the antithesis of democracy. No one surveying the moral landscape of our nation can overlook the hideous wreckage of commitment twisted and turned to 1,000 shapes under the stress of prejudice and irrationality," end quote. No matter how many mirrors we shatter or leave face down in the Rio Grande, we can't seem to escape the reality that drives us mad. We are not who we say we are, and we're left with the question, what happens to a nation that inhabits a lie since its inception? I've talked about the lie or set of lies in the context of James Baldwin's nonfiction writings. Y'all all right? Sometimes we can get caught up in the performance of it all. But every now and then you remember that the days have called you to speak to the moment, such times as these require a seriousness of spirit. I've been tracking the lies. I've talked about it as this broad and powerful architecture of myths and fantasies, stereotypes and false assumptions that give life to what I've called the value gap, what I've talked about already, this belief that some people, because of the color of their skin, are valued and ought to be valued more than others. And that belief and the stories we tell and the practices that shape our daily lives block the way to America becoming a multiracial democracy. And perhaps more importantly, that belief distorts and disfigures who we take ourselves to be as human beings. The value gap affects the moral quality of our living in that it limits our capacity for generosity, our sense of humility, our idea of benevolence and mutuality, and distorts our view of justice. As Baldwin wrote in No Name in the Street, quote, "I've always been struck," he says, "in America by an emotional poverty so bottomless and a terror of human life, of human touch, so deep that virtually no American appears able to achieve any viable organic connection between his public stance and his private life. This is what makes them so baffling, so moving, so exasperating, and so untrustworthy, end quote. The distortion and disfigurement, the consequences of the lie, not so much the lie itself, draws my attention here. It is what the protagonist in Ralph Ellison's novel Invisible Man sees in the eyes of the white man who refuses to see him in the prologue. Remember that moment? A wildness that looks past you, that gives the appearance of being awake, but in reality it is a kind of sleepwalking that keeps the world exactly as it is and forces him, the man made invisible, to go underground. From Frederick Douglass to W.B. Du Bois, from Harriet Jacobs to Toni Morrison, African-American writers, alongside many others, have tried to lay bare the meaning and implication of the lie. They have also spoken of the madness that results from it all. That the disorienting and disquieting gap between who we say we are as Americans and what we actually do cast a disturbing shadow over this place that feels heavy like the weight of Mississippi summers in August. We are desperately afraid of being exposed, I think, in this country. We're desperately afraid of being exposed, particularly to ourselves, and that fear has led to a kind of delirium that erupts repeatedly in unimaginable violence. I could draw a straight line from the Paxton Boys to the Proud Boys. Ask me later who the Paxton Boys are. This is more than a battle between our better and lesser angels. That is a fight we all experience, a consequence perhaps of the debacle in the Garden of Eden. The original sin stains American madness but does not exhaust it. Ours is the effect of refusing at every turn to accept who we are, to prefer illusion and fantasy over responsibility. And whether we admit it or not, race sits at the heart of it all. Slavery and Jim Crow cast their shadow. Our better the white well makes us all mad. Baldwin put it even more bluntly in his 1953 essay, Stranger in the Village. He said, quote, "The Negro in America is a form of insanity which overtakes white men," end quote. Perhaps this is so because knotted and tangled up in the question of the role and place of black people in this country are all the contradictions and evils that we so desperately try to keep buried and hidden, which in turn keeps this nation stuck from becoming what it can be. Declarations of our pursuit of perfection only make matters worse. They amount to rituals of absolution, the equivalent of an adolescent saying that they're trying to be better. In fact, within the pursuit of perfection, madness hides behind a fantasy of national virtue as the bodies pile up. Here at once is the American dream and the nightly terrors that come with it. I'm coming to a close. That was a Black Baptist preacher's technique. No, I'm not. In a 1993 interview with Charlie Rose, the late novelist Toni Morrison spoke of this madness. Oh, Toni. After telling the story that the black tennis great Arthur Ashe once told him that living with AIDS was easier than living with racists, Rose asked Morrison, quote, "Do you, Toni Morrison, Pulitzer Prize winner, successful, honored in the halls of academia, etc., do you still have that encounter with racism?" End quote. Morrison looks disappointed in the question, perhaps more so in Rose as she purses and puckers her lips, and says with a smoke-laden softness, quote, "Yes, I do, Charlie, but let me tell you that that's the wrong question." "Okay, what's the right question?" Rose asked. And here Morrison taps the root and reveals the source of this nation's unadmitted sorrow. Quote, "How do you feel?" Not you, Charlie Rose, but don't you understand that the people who do this thing, who practice racism, are bereft? There is something distorted about the psyche. It's a huge waste, and it's a corruption and a distortion. It's like a profound neurosis that nobody examines for what it is. It feels crazy. It is crazy. And it has just as much of a deleterious effect on white people, and possibly equal, than it does on black people, end quote. Here, Morrison channels her reading of Melville's classic novel, Moby Dick, and its crazed character, Captain Ahab, and his obsession with the white whale. For her, the whale is more than blind, indifferent nature. It represents perhaps the consolidation of whiteness as an ideology, as a way of seeing and being, of valuing certain bodies over others that swallows everything else whole. Quote, "If the white whale is the ideology of race," she writes in 1988. What Ahab has lost to it is personal dismemberment and family and society and his own place as a human being in the world. The trauma of racism is for the racist and for the victim the severe fragmentation of the self. And it has always seemed to me a cause, not a symptom, of psychosis, end quote. This is what Baldwin called the price of the ticket. Whether we are referring to the Aaron in the wilderness of Puritans escaping European persecution, or to those who made their way to Ellis Island for something they thought was freedom, that journey required that they leave something behind and narrow their understanding of themselves and of the world. They had to become white, Baldwin says, and the costs were unimaginable. This, quote, "incredibly limited, not to say dim-witted ambition has choked many a human being to death here," he says, "and drove a host of others mad." Now, I'm aware of the danger of my use of such terms. I risk falling into the trap of silly psychologizing at best and gross generalizations at worst. What kind of hubris would lead me or Morrison or Baldwin in this instance to say that racist white folk are crazy? I must admit that I've heard some version of this all my life, especially growing up on the coast of Mississippi. Something must be wrong with them to believe such things about us, the grown folks used to say. Or my dad would say it, and I can hear his voice in my own. These white folks have lost their damn minds. Madness as metaphor captures what is felt and lived on the other side of the railroad tracks or behind the veil, that partition which separates white and black worlds. In this conversation, though, with Charlie Rose, Morrison takes us deeper than a common sense that results from living in a racist society. She calls for an exploration of the madness at the heart of American identity, and I think that is what is required of us today, to tap the root and reveal what this idea of America obscures. White folk are so much more than whiteness. You're so much more than that. I just pray that you can believe that. Especially today. I found myself the other day in a train station in Trenton, New Jersey. I was on my way to Washington, D.C. to meet with a group of scholars and just to show off the Vice President of the United States, to discuss the current state of the country. Train stations in the early morning are what they are, an odd collision of humanity, yes? People sleeping, others rummaging for food or asking for money, sleepy-eyed men and women dressed in business attire preparing for their meetings in New York City, families huddled together, waiting for the long ride to Miami. One fella ate, and it was about 7 o'clock in the morning. He was eating a Brooklyn sandwich and drinking strawberry quick, and said to no one in particular that he was happy to finally get back to Miami. As I waited, I noticed a young black man sitting alone in a corner. He looked about 18 or 19 years old. He was neatly groomed. His locks were tied behind his head. A bit heavy-set, wearing a navy blue Oxford shirt, brown khaki pants, and black high-top DC sneakers. His shoelaces were crisp white, and the bottom of his pants were tucked deliberately behind the tongue of his shoes. A backpack carelessly lay at his feet. He looked sad, like a shadow hung over his head. Then he suddenly shouted, and the words were random. "Don't care about your colors," he said. A group of transit police looked over, chuckled to themselves, and returned to their conversations. The young man put his chin in his hands. He stared. I caught his eye. I looked away. He then blurted, when confronting madness, it is usually best to hold one's peace, as Baldwin says. So I looked away. He then blurted out, and excuse my language, please. He then blurted out, "Y'all niggas better live y'all's lives." That's what I wish I was doing. Y'all better live y'all's lives. That's what I wish I was doing. He sat back, stared blankly, seeing nothing and everything. I thought of Ralph Ellison's essay, Harlem is Nowhere, and his description of the madman hurling imaginary bombs in Harlem, or the madmen and women who serve as the chorus in August Wilson's cycle of plays, the characters out of time who seem to know the truth and bear witness. What might it mean to make a radical and courageous choice when madness abounds? The fever dreams have spiked and terror spreads. No matter if we are steadfast, we will survive this storm and know the storms are always coming. Love secures us amid its destructive winds. It is the going towards that is our salvation, not the separation. It is the going towards that is our salvation. And the moment, Baldwin says, the moment we cease to hold each other, the moment we break faith with one another, the sea engulfs us and the light goes out, end quote. So as I close, my thoughts return to the young man in Trenton Station. He shouted, despite his wounds, that we must live our lives, that he wished he was living his. True words. But I'm also thinking about him, his sad eyes, the cloud that hung over his head. But I'm remembering how he was dressed. I'm remembering his pants and his shirt and his neat locks. Somebody cared for that baby still. Somebody was loving that baby still. In the midst of the madness, somewhere love had enveloped him that tends to him still. In the midst of the storm, if we love each other, we can make it through. It is the going towards where salvation is found. The freedom dreams have spiked. Madness abounds. What will be your choice? What will be your choice? What will be your choice? Thank you so much.